This is Uncovering Dark Falls. Thank you for sticking around. You're gonna want to hear this part. Where did we leave off last? I got an invitation to attend this horror-themed amusement park. After a lot of debates and putting it off and procrastination, honestly, I was a little bit nervous. Had some holiday family stuff to take care of first. I ended up going, despite my body just not wanting me to. I still went, and I explored this thing deep enough to where something found me, and then it started chasing me. This is where we pick up. If you've never ridden down a raging river on the smooth surface of a gently used coffin, well, consider yourself lucky. The Horrorland Horror just stood on the dock, watching me as I sailed past, and my hands started scrambling as I tried to find something to hold on to. Before he disappeared around the corner, I saw him raise his hand very slowly, and then he waved at me in this slow, deliberate swish of his thick wrist. "Enjoy your ride." I heard him say that before the river took a sharp turn and he was lost. I suddenly understood the terror of Lizzie and her brother Luke as they cruised down this same serene river. I understood it because the gentle swaying was about to give way to the rapids that were frothing up ahead. I reached around the sides of the coffin, grabbing onto one of the iron handholds, and all I could do was brace for impact. I started having more flashbacks of the show that I remembered. The ride is supposed to be a nice, gentle, lazy river water ride where you head down the river in a boat that's made from an old coffin. Lizzie is hesitant, being just a little claustrophobic, but her brother Luke is excited to take the boat ride of a lifetime. At first, the kids find joy in it. It's kind of nice just bobbing down the river in a coffin, watching the park slip by. It's fun right up until the lids come down, and then they're trapped inside the boats as they careen down the rapids. Lizzie starts freaking out. The actress, likely actually claustrophobic, but Luke tells her to stop being such a baby right up until he realizes that his boat has a second passenger in there with him. The spider that he sees in this thing is huge and hairy, and Luke squeezes himself right up against the wall of the casket as close as he can. He makes himself flat as a pancake to avoid just getting near this spider that he's now trapped in there with. The kid that they got to play Luke is actually doing a great job, and the casting is good enough that I can believe both of them were afraid for their lives. I mean, genuinely. They start banging on the lids, they're trying to get out, and when the coffins suddenly open to reveal the gruesome face of the ride operator, they realize that the boat ride has come to an end. Luke and Lizzie are done by then. They just want to go home. They want to go to Zoo Gardens, but mostly they just want to be out of Horrorland. They end up finding their parents, both of whom are also ready to get the heck out of there, but when they return to the gates, they find that they're rechained and locked up again. And that's when they see it. The sign that tells their guests exactly what's in store next and lets them know their chances of escape have become very slim. The sign says, "No exit. Nobody leaves Horrorland alive." Now me, snapping back to my own reality, the rapids on the show had looked rough, but the water that was soaking into my real clothes in the moment was downright deadly. My coffin wasn't just bobbing on the water. I was splashing up and down, nearly capsizing as the rapids tossed my makeshift boat around like a little toy. I held my breath as I went over a small waterfall, but it wasn't until the coffin broke the surface again that I saw my salvation. Just a little bit up ahead, there were quite a few of the other coffins that had gotten stuck on some rocks, and my boat was heading right for them. I braced for the incoming bump, and when I felt like I could get my feet under me again, I threw myself onto another coffin, and then I made my way to shore. That was one ride that wasn't going to be on my trip advisory. "I've got to get out of here," I said to myself. The problem was that I had no clue where I even was. One path looked exactly the same as the others here, and as the sun began to ride low in the sky, I was more and more aware that the park didn't seem to have any lights. It was getting darker, and as I looked around frantically, I heard the sound of a stick snap behind me. I turned toward the trees, and sure enough, my new friend on the dock hadn't been alone. There were a dozen or so hunched and bulging forms that were trying to hide in the scant tree line, and I chose a path at random and I just started booking it, man. I could understand how the Morrises from the show had felt now as I was being pursued through the same park. Now on the show, the whole family had turned from the gate to find a whole group of horrors just waiting for them. They were implored to ride the rides, to have a snack, to go back into the park, to calm down, and the father becomes indignant, telling them that he wants to speak to the manager, but when he tries to remove the mask of one of the park workers, well, he discovers that it's not a mask. The family is being menaced by real monsters, and the horrors have only just begun. The Morris family is captured and subjected to a fate much worse than death, if you ask me. Public access TV. They were invited to play a game on Monster Cable's own Raw Deal. And though the family is hesitant, they eventually decide to play because they learn that the grand prize is a brand new car. And this is good, since their car has exploded, remember? And when they learn that it's the kids versus the adults, they figure there's no way they can lose. They get that brand new car either way. The rules of the show are convoluted. The consolation prizes are gross, but the adults solve the puzzle and they're given a choice of doors. One leads to the car, and one leads to certain doom. Lizzie realizes that their chances are slim, but she recalls the sign from earlier and decides to try her luck. It turns out that pinching the Horrorland horrors, people that work there, not people, but the monsters that work there, cause them to actually deflate. And one good pinch sends the host melting into a pile of ooze. After leaving a couple of them in gooey piles, the Morris family makes their escape. They rush together backstage and they find a bus with the Horrorland logo across the side. They steal that bus and then they flee the park. The horrors that are left behind are trying to stop them as they fly through the fence and escape the park for good. They drive home, the Morrises having escaped their grisly vacation, but Luke wonders what they will tell Clay's parents when they get back. Remember, they haven't seen Clay since he chose to go down slide number 10 earlier in the day. Mr. Morris reckons that they can send some help once they make it home, and they pull into the driveway as they feel certain that their ordeal is finally over. Once everybody's out of the bus, however, it appears that the bus had a stowaway. One of the horrors comes spilling out from under the bus, and the family prepares to just fight it off. Everyone puts up their dukes, and it's game time. But before anybody could even start swinging, they learn that the horror is not there to hurt them. Actually, it's quite the opposite. He gives them free passes for next year before taking his leave, and then the show ends with the family just watching the beast disappear into the sunset. That's when the show had fuzzed out, and as my parents walked back into the hotel room, they found me curled up under the covers as I watched the ending through a tiny little gap in the blanket that I had made for myself. I don't know what that show was, and I never found out, to be honest. I know I had nightmares about it after that, but to me, it was always just a weird show that I saw as a kid. Running up the paths now, the show seemed a little less weird and a lot more prophetic. I could hear the slobbering monsters as they were now chasing me, and I wondered if I too was going to be subjected to a fate worse than death. I could hear their heavy breathing, and the sunset casting them in these strange shadows and foreboding glamour. They moved through the woods like out-of-shape ghosts, and when the gates came into view, I put an extra burst of speed. I put on my sonic shoes and I just bolted out of there even quicker than I already was. I could make it. I was going to escape. But it wasn't until I hit the gate and bounced back that I discovered what they had done. They had been the ones to unlock the gate. I understood that now. They led me into a trap, and now I was caught. I was seeing stars as they surrounded me, and when they buried me in a wave of flesh and chuckles, I thought I'd never wake up again. But as I came to, strapped to a chair in a dark sound studio, boy, I wish I hadn't. I pulled on the restraints, already guessing what I would find, and I was right. I was strapped into the electric chair, the cap on my head, and probes jabbing into my legs. I was terrified. I think that goes without saying, but it was more than just waking up finding myself in this situation. I've been in tough spots before, dude, but never anything like this. This was the closest I've ever felt to death, and the cold feeling that spread through me made me wonder if I was gonna make it out again. I glanced around the set, seeing the familiar game from the show that I remembered, all the booths and the podiums, and I realized I knew where I was. It was the same set that I had seen the Morse family stand on as they played the game show that would nearly end their lives. Everything was dark now, no one around to fill me in on the situation, but I assumed that someone would come around and let me know what was up when the time came. Until then, I just reckoned I might as well conserve my energy. If the Morris family games were any indication, I might need what little I had very soon.
I can't believe we caught him,
said this blustery voice as someone came from offset.
It's been forever since we had a guest star. The ratings are gonna go up for sure. Monster Cable High hasn't been the same since Horrorland shut down. With the number of young people who have started coming in to have a look at the old park, we might be able to start having shows again. Get him ready. We'll start playing in 5.
The lights came up, and I jerked back a little bit as I came face to face with a monster in this flamboyant shirt. It was open at the throat, showing off a lot of green chest, and he jumped back as well when he realized that I was awake. It seemed that we had startled each other, and I almost laughed at how over the top he was about it.
Oh, heavens, I didn't mean to startle you. Just coming in to do the makeup. We were glad to see you come in. It's been ages since we had guests.
I started to ask him what was going on, but when he booped me with a powder puff on my nose, all I could do was just cough on the dust. I said, what's going on?
What's going on is that you are today's guest on Raw Deal. It's quite an honor. At least people think so.
Like from the TV show? I guessed as I tried to cough the powder out of my throat.
Oh, yes, it used to be all the rage of the Monster Cable Network. Now, however, everybody wants Monster's satellite, so I'm afraid our numbers have gone way, way down. I think Wretch is trying to fix that, bless his heart. He wants everything back to the glory days so badly, but he just won't understand that times have changed. Anyway, I'm at least hoping that we can get a good show out of it. Hold still, please. I don't want your face to look like pancake batter.
He powdered my face a little more, turning my head side to side so that he could get a look at me. And as he finished putting on the last touch, he clapped his hands and proclaimed me fit for television. There were a few people gathering in the audience section by now, but I had already seen that the seats stretched on to a point where they could fit hundreds. The few of them that were starting to fill the seats almost looked ashamed to be there, and I wondered where they had come from. Or maybe they were just paid spectators. But as the music started and the lights began to move around the audience, I heard a voice, straight from my childhood, booming behind me. Welcome to today's episode of Raw Deal. I'm your host, Wretch Sniff, and today, our friend here will be playing for a fabulous prize. The crowd clapped, but I returned to just rocking the chair as I tried to free myself. Prize smize, I said. Let me out of here, you freaking goblin. Wretch waggled a finger at the audience as he laughed in my face and said, Now, we prefer the term horrors. Goblins are copyrighted, and we'll probably have to cut that in post. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, Mr. I told him to eat me. I yelled it as I rocked and strained at the arm straps. Welcome to the show, Mr. Eat Me, and he said as he leaned in and pitched his voice even lower. "Don't tempt me, human. Today we'll be playing for a chance at something really special. Slappy, tell him what he's playing for." A second whore, its feather boa looking pretty ragged, wheeled out a case as the announcer proclaimed it to be a mystery prize. "Mr. Me will be playing for one of our park artifacts, a rare find that is priceless and heavily sought after." The crowd clapped as Wretch turned back to me, teeth huge in his mouth. "You'll have to solve our puzzle in order to win today's prize, but if you get 3 wrong answers," then he turned back to the audience and winked at them, "then he wins a very different prize. Tell him, Slappy." I suddenly felt a hum run through the chair as the coils on the device sprang to life. "It's 50,000 volts, brought to you straight from the country generator that we may or may not have legally spliced into. This electricity will be passed through your body until such time as you are no more. May Glob have mercy on your soul. Thanks, Slappy. So, Mr. Eat Me, are you ready to start?" I didn't seem to have much of a choice in the moment, and as the boa-wearing monster indicated towards the board, I saw that my chances might have gotten a little better. The answer was 11 letters long. It's not too terribly complicated, and I glanced at Wretch, and he winked as if to indicate that this should be a cakewalk. He goes on to say, "So, why don't you go ahead and select your first letter?" I looked out at the audience. My brain locked up a little bit as I tried to think of a good letter, and I finally settled on S. S was always the first letter they picked on Wheel of Fortune, so it seemed like a good one here too. "We have one S." The S was revealed, and I started feeling a little better about my situation. Now surely, this had to have been a joke or some sort of setup. I mean, they weren't really going to zap me, were they? I shouted out, "T," and Wretch says, "We have a T." Those letters didn't help much though, so I figured I'd just try another popular one from game shows. I said, "N. You're really on a roll. There is an N," Wretch announced to everybody in the audience. The letter now showed blank 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 N T blank 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 S blank. It didn't mean much to me yet, so I decided to try my luck again. I said, A, how about an A?" Wretch turns his back and says, "Is there an A?" "Yes, there are 2 A's in fact." The monster version of Vanna White rolled them over, and now I had a little more to work with. The puzzle now showed blank A, blank NT, blank 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 AS blank. It still didn't mean too much to me, but my confidence was at an all-time high. I was feeling pretty good, and that's when I made my first mistake. I asked for a B. Wretch looked at the board, and when the negative, sound echoed through the studio, I felt electricity flow through me. It wasn't the killing bolts that they had promised. It was a little less than probably a standard taser, I suppose, but I could feel my teeth come together hard enough to make them click. I screamed, obviously, right? The shock had been absolutely unexpected, and as I hung there, I felt my breath hitching in and out. "What the hell was that?" I shouted, looking around as I'd sat on a live wire. "Just a little reminder of what's at stake. Now, another letter, please." My head was spinning, the electroshock making me a little woozy, but as the letters swam before me, I tried to figure them out. I guessed, how about an E? Wretch looked back at the board, and I braced for another zap. E? E? Yes, we have an E. The board now showed blank A blank NTE blank blank AS blank. What the heck was that? Mr. Me, let's move it along now. Select another letter. D, I said, listlessly. And he says, there is a D. The monster, Vanna White, rolled it around, but it didn't help much still. Blank, A, blank, NTED blank AS blank. I don't know. What could this be? Dude, nothing was coming to me. It seemed kind of familiar, but I couldn't put it together in my current state. I did not want to get zapped again, though, so I tried to steady myself, and I made another guess. How about a K? By now, the crowd was getting into it, sitting in anticipation as they looked at the board and saw the feathered monster roll over another letter. Great job, buddy. Just 3 letters to go and 2 strikes remaining. Let's have another one. The board now showed blank A blank NTED blank ASK. I thought about it, rolling through all of the possibilities that this thing could be. It still looked very familiar. The name might be something I recognized, and I don't know, I just decided to chance it again. I decided to go for it, and I asked, "Is it painted mask?" The bolt that went through me reminded me of the time I had stuck a fork in a socket when I was a kid. I could smell my hair singeing, I could feel my nerves jump, and my arms and my legs were still jittering when my ears finally stopped ringing. I couldn't focus. Everything was just swimming, and I caught Wretch mid-sentence when all of my senses started coming back. I could hear him say, "One more strike before you win your shocking prize, but you do still have a chance to win the mystery prize, so let's have another letter." He looked off stage as someone was motioning to him, whispering kind of, "Mr. Me, the judges have decided that your guess was partially right. They are going to give you a letter that you guessed correctly, so here it is." They rolled over another letter, and I smiled grimly as my jaw jittered. Blank A blank NTED MASK. It was obvious now, and I should have seen it before. I don't know what I was thinking, dude. Obviously, I was hurt and in a state of just pure panic and fear. It was one of my favorite books as a kid. "I'd like to solve the puzzle, Wretch," I said, my tongue feeling furry now in the moment. "Oh? Well, give it a shot, Sparky," I shouted out at the top of my lungs. "Haunted mask!" And everything went silent for a moment. I thought I was wrong, and I thought I was cooked meat at that point. Everything stood still for about the count of 5, and when the audience went wild as the letters were finally turned over, I could hear Wretch roar in delight. "Congratulations, Mr. Me! You've won the jackpot!" They released me from the chair, and Wretch and about a half a dozen others shook my hand. The monster who had been turning the letters surprised me with this big, scaly kiss right on my mouth, and they pushed the display case into my arms as they bustled me backstage. "That was great. You really are a star, Mr. Me. No hard feelings, right? It's all showbiz, baby, and we are monsters of our word. We do hope you'll come back again. Have a safe trip home, and remember to tune in to channel 666 on Monday to watch your performance." Suddenly, I was being pushed out a door, and I found myself stepping into a sewer pipe before the door was slammed behind me. A short walk through the pipe brought me to a culvert on the edge of the woods, and I was pretty sure I could kind of finally see my car off in the distance. I'd come out on the edge of Fever Swamp, and I suppose it had all been worth it if it meant I didn't have to walk through the dark. All in all, it had been an exciting trip, but it wasn't until I got in the car that I had a look at the display case that was shoved into my torso and I had been carrying, this whole time. It was a full-sized, lurid green, creepy as all hell Halloween mask. "Oh, great. Just what I always wanted," I growled, putting it in the passenger seat as I headed home.
"You're not much of a prize yourself,
said a raspy voice, and I turned to discover that it was the mask sitting in the case beside me.
"Take a picture, kid. It'll last longer."
It was obvious to me that my next mystery had been hand-delivered directly into my arms.
Uncovering Dark Falls is written by David Caleb and Dr. Plague. created, produced, and narrated by Derek Weber.